I actually fell in love by electronic mail. You might think that it's not possible to know someone intimately enough to love them over electronic mail, but by the time I actually met Michael in person, I knew so much about him, I knew him so well by our communications electronically that I didn't care what he looked like.
Hello and welcome to MicroLive. This week we're devoting the whole programme to a look at one of the major growth areas for the use of the personal micro, electronic mail.
Electronic mail, or email for short, involves linking the computer, and it could be almost any micro, to the telephone system via a modem. Now, all a modem does is to take the zeros and ones of the computer circuits and to convert them into high and low tones, which can pass along the phone line. There are basically two ways of doing that. There are acoustic couplers, where you plug the phone itself into these cups here, and there are the more reliable direct-coupled modems, which plug straight into the phone socket. Those can be as cheap as about £25.
Well, some of you who use email already may have sent us your views on why you use it. If you're on Telecom Gold, you could still send us a message during the programme. Here's the number, and we'll be having a look at some of your comments later on.
Well, why do people use electronic mail? Some recent research by IBM showed that as many as 70% of business phone calls fail to achieve their goal for one reason or another. And the Consumers Association magazine Which revealed that out of every 5 first-class letters, 2 of them don't get there the next day. So it's not surprising that more and more companies and individuals are turning to electronic ways of getting messages through to people quickly.
Kit Cowlishaw has a fellowship at Somerville College, Oxford. She's developing courses designed to encourage computer awareness, but she normally works for IBM, where centres all over the world are connected together by electronic mail.
A telephone, compared to electronic mail, is like a stone axe. I've got to hear busy signals. I've got to hear the phone ringing and no one being there. I've got to look at my watch before I pick up the telephone to see if someone might be asleep in Australia or Japan. I've got to know what time of day it is over there, whether they're sitting at their desk, whether they're at lunch. I haven't got any of those worries with electronic mail. I can just send my message and know that eventually they'll get it when they're reading their mail.
Since the personal micro boom started about 5 years ago, the number of electronic mail users has doubled every year. Some commentators have even said that in business it could rival the use of the telephone by 1995. According to The Guardian, the French have over 1 million terminals giving access to email, and the service is expected to have as many as 10 million users by 1990. And in this country, The Observer puts the British market at £1.5 billion, again by 1990. As it gets better known, email is now beginning to turn up in the most unexpected settings.
Ralston Road Day Nursery is on a large estate in West London. It's one of 10 run by Hammersmith Council and looks after 50 preschool children, many of them with special needs. In their day-to-day work, the staff often need to contact others in the social services department. What nobody wants is to waste time on the telephone trying to get in touch with people who aren't there.
Social workers work odd hours, they're frequently out on visits, and we're constantly trying to contact them, which can be very time-consuming.
Hello, is Bob Jones there? I've been trying to get him for ages. I can't get hold of him. You don't know when he'll be back, but can you take a message? Is his secretary anywhere? Thank you.
In a department like social services, apart from headquarters, we've got something in excess of 30 offices outside. And one of the major problems we have is actually being able to contact each other.
A parent might come into the nursery and say that she's got to go into hospital for an emergency operation, and will need a foster parent for her child because there's no relative to look after the child, we might then need to contact the social worker to arrange this foster placement. We could try again to get in contact, but the social worker might be out on visits, and this could take a lot of our time up. And it's also a very urgent situation, and obviously the parent needs to know what's going to be happening with her child.
Since we're also dealing with often clients' lives, some of these messages that we're trying to pass to each other can actually be vitally important.
Hammersmith was the first local authority in the country to use a new form of communications. Apart from its built-in telephone, the One Per Desk, or OPD, looks like any desktop computer with built-in programs ranging from word processing to spreadsheets. Built by ICL and incorporating some of the circuitry originally developed for the Sinclair QL, the One Per Desk is designed to be a sort of electronic jack-of-all-trades. But its real purpose is to communicate. With a built-in telephone and modem, it acts as an intelligent terminal. And in Hammersmith, it's used to send messages to any of 100 OPDs installed in the borough. The machine acts as an electronic memo pad. You just compose your message, add the name and telephone number of the person it's for, and the machine does the rest. It automatically dials up the number, and even if the person's out, the message is sent to their OPD and stored to be read later. The machines dial each other directly using the ordinary telephone system. There's no central computer. If you want to send the same message to more than one person, the machine will dial them in turn. But they can only read your message from their own desks.
Well, that's one solution, but as you've seen, if you were sent a message on that system, you'd have to go to your own desk to read it. But an OPD, like other terminals, can be used in another way, because most electronic mail services make use of a central computer, which can be dialed up by you from anywhere. The system works like this. Someone dials up, enters his private mailbox on the computer, and from that mailbox sends a message to your mailbox. Now, all that happens within the computer system. The message then sits there until you dial up, enter your own mailbox, and see if there are any messages waiting. When you've read the message, you can reply to it or forward it to somebody else. And more than that, the central computer can act as a gateway to other computers, providing services like telex and access to information databanks all over the world.
Well, let's see all that in action using a simple home system. I've already dialed up the computer on this using a modem here, and I'm into the telecoms computer now, and it's asking me which machine my electronic mail is on. So I'm going to tell it. I'm going to say, call 81. That's the number of the machine that I'm on. And it's connected. It says, please sign on. I'm getting a lot of garbage on this line here, but that may just be a bad line I've got. And I give it my ID. Well, I hope it's getting the right signals. MIC001 is my identification, and it isn't doing anything. It really is in a bad state, which means I'm going to have to try and get out of this and re-log in again. I'm afraid there's nothing happening here. It's asking me for my password. I'll try that and see if it's receiving from me. It may just be receiving from me, and it looks as if it is. It was actually receiving from me, but I was getting bad messages back. And there is a message for me asking for meeting. It's asking me to read or scan. I'll read it, and it comes back, and there's the message. I'm getting a lot of junk coming back from the computer itself. Is it all right for you and Fred to meet me in the office at 10 o'clock? David. Well, the action, and you can see a lot of noise on the line there, but it seems to be receiving from me, so I'll carry on. And the action is I want to reply. So I'll send a reply, and it's asking for the text. And I say, OK for me, Mac. And to send that off, I just hit .s. And that should have immediately been sent, and I'm taking that gibberish is actually saying it has been sent. This is a brilliant demonstration of British Telecom Gold and the quality of the lines we get. Action required. Well, I'm going to forward that to Fred, because he might just be receiving things a little bit better than I am. He can tell me what it says. Fred. And that's forwarded to Fred, and comments. Well, I'm going to say, I have a bad line, but this is OK for me. Now, you've only got my word for it. They're actually typed that. My typing just cannot possibly be as bad as that. Anyway, to send it, I just hit .s, and hopefully away it's gone.
Well, people ask if we're live. I don't know. Well, let's imagine I'm somewhere else in the country and I want to see if Mac has sent me anything. This time I'm using an Atari with some software that does all the fiddly bits for me. And here are some of the systems that I can log on to. There they are. It's gold I want, so I've selected that one and I will ask the machine to dial up. Press a button on the mouse and it tells me, yes, it is dialing. Well, it's doing that automatically, and while it's doing it, I can reveal that Mac was using that email system all the wrong way. Now, it wasn't his fault, all that junk, but you see, he was reading his mail and sending a reply while he was online. And that costs him. On this system, it costs 11 pence a minute at peak times, and 3.5 pence on top of, that's off-peak, on top of the call. Now, that noise we've got there means that something's happening here. The machine is about to download everything straight into the memory. Then I can prepare my replies offline. That is, not connected to the system at all. Well, there's Mac's message, I think, coming up. Yes, it says something from Mac, so we certainly got it through. Is it all right for you and Fred to meet me in the office at 11 o'clock? And there's Mac's added comments there and a few more messages as well. Now, I can prepare my replies and send them back without having to sit there typing with that bill ticking up. Well, you can see that this machine has logged on for me. It's now downloading any unread mail totally automatically, and that will take a minute or so.
Well, you've been able to sell information electronically for some time, from pictures being sent between police forces for catching criminals to facsimile transmissions for documents that must be reproduced exactly. I hope their line quality was a bit better than what we got. There's even voicemail, which is recorded digitally before transmission and storage. But none of these is growing as fast as email. One of the most important things about email systems of the kind we've been showing is that you can also use them as a gateway or an entrance point to all kinds of independent services. Well, this one I'm using is called World Reporter, and it's a database containing a complete text of various international newspapers and journals. The Washington Post, the Financial Times, The Economist, New Scientist, and so on. Well, what I'm going to try to do, hopefully, is to look into The Guardian. And I type in GDN, at least it's shown that, so that's something. And oh, we're working again. There we go. I'm into The Guardian. And what I'm going to do is to ask it to get some information for me and to get any article in about 2.5 years of The Guardian which have information on MicroLive and screens. And now it's going to search through about 2.5 years of articles from The Guardian to determine any one that has MicroLive and screens. And there's one item, and I can see what that has to say, the text. And that will bring out the article itself. And there it is, an article, City Firms Miss Computer Spies by Peter Large, their technology editor. And there is MicroLive, that's just appeared there, and there is Screen. So it's selected that article, and in fact it's a programme we did a few weeks ago on electronic spying. Well, there are many other databases, including a worldwide guide to air schedules and international hotels, and for the home user there are computer user groups and a free service for schools. There's even a translation service where you enter the document in any European language, this is sent to a real human translator, and you get it back in the language of your choice. Some of these services are free, but access to some of the more valuable business databases go up to £2.50 a minute, so take care.
Well, I've been keeping my costs down. While Mac was doing that, I finished downloading all my unread mail and the machine automatically logged off. Now, you can see on the screen that I've actually got a total of 8 pieces of mail here. It took, well, it says 0 minutes, but that's because it took less than a minute. But the actual computer time, that is on the remote computer, the central computer, was just 2 seconds, you see. And that's very important, as we'll see later. Now, although I've logged off and I'm now disconnected from the phone line, I've saved all those messages onto disk. So now I can print them out or read them at my leisure without bumping up my phone bill. Now, Lesley.
Well, since we opened up our mailboxes last week, literally hundreds of you have sent messages, and it seems as though there's messages, well, as people from all walks of life use email. For instance, we've got a company, we've got a travelling circus, rather, who use Telecom Gold for sending telexes and Prestel for making bookings. And then we've heard from a company who uses email to keep in touch with their sales reps. And they say, in the field, their reps type reports and quotations on lap-held computers. Then we heard from Jack Schofield, editor of The Guardian's computer page, and he tells us he gets articles sent to him by email and he can reply to 6 letters in 3 minutes. And We've also heard here from a profoundly deaf person who uses email daily, and he says it puts people on equal terms. And from some solicitors who use it for company searches and hope to use it for conveyancing. And one solicitor actually said, with email, it should be possible to work more quickly, and that would be good news, really, for house buyers. Patrick Eager, the cricket photographer, often deals with Australia, but uses the system mainly for sending telexes from his own home. And we've even had a message here from a barrister who believes that in the future, legal submissions may be made to court by email and some cases tried by communications links. Hugh Johnson, the wine journalist, uses email for updating his annual wine guide. And finally, James Galway, the flute player, said, email enables me to stay in touch with my London and USA offices, wherever I happen to be, and my children are also on the system, and we exchange the funniest letters. Generally speaking, everyone seems to agree that email allows messages to be very informal, and perhaps the most informal example of all that we've come across is that of Kitteridge Cowlishaw.
You met your husband through electronic mail, didn't you?
Well, yes, that's right. I mean, that's a good example of someone I never would have met otherwise, because I was working in New York at the research centre, and he was working in Winchester, England. And, we wouldn't have telephoned across that distance because it would have... we wouldn't have found each other at work at the same time of day. There's this time zone problem again. And I wouldn't have written either because we didn't have a formal business relationship, but I knew that he was an expert on design of programming languages, and I had questions about that I wanted to ask. So I could send them off to him knowing I wouldn't interrupt him. He could read them, and if he liked, he could respond when he had time. So I did send a message asking about some programming languages, and he sent them back, and we began to talk about design of languages and other computing matters, and we discovered we had a lot in common. Although I didn't know what he looked like, you see, because that's another nice thing about electronic mail. You're able to communicate directly without being distracted by personal characteristics. So eventually we got to know each other, and the things that we got to know about each other, you might think people can't fall in love by electronic mail, but actually the things that come through in electronic mail, the way of expressing yourself, your attitudes, your thoughts, your sense of humor, all those things come across loud and clear without the distractions of, do I like the way he looks? Is she pretty? And so by the time we met in person, we knew so much about each other, and we were so much in love that it didn't matter what he looked like. And when I discovered that, in fact, he was rather too tall for my taste, the other things so outweighed it that I married him anyway.
Kitteridge Cowlishaw and her husband were using IBM's internal electronic mail system, which has around 50,000 of its employees using it worldwide. And many other large companies have their own internal system. But this is the central computer room at 1-to-1, one of a number of public electronic mail services in the UK. This one is owned by Pacific Bell of California. These are the machines where your message would be stored. This is the home of your mailbox. Now, if you live in London, you can reach this computer by making a local telephone call. But if you live outside, you don't necessarily have to pay the costs of a long-distance call. You can use something called the packet switching system. Now remember, when you're using electronic mail, you only make contact with the computer itself for a very few moments. For most of the time, the telephone line is doing absolutely nothing. So packet switching makes use of that fact to keep the costs down over long distances. You dial a local number, which connects you with a small local computer called a pad. This takes your message and bundles it up into small packets of information. Wrapped around these packets is more data about the destination of the message. These packets are then mixed in with packets of information from other people's messages, and the whole mixture is sent by whichever telephone route is best at that moment. At the destination, the packets are broken down and the message reassembled in the right order. The four major electronic mail systems today are British Telecom's Telecom Gold with 70% of the market, and then there's 1-to-1 here with 20%, EasyLink, which is run by Cable and Wireless, and Comet, which was developed by British Leyland. And there's also BT's Prestel, which has limited messaging facilities. And all of these systems use BT's packet switching service. But the extraordinary thing is that if you're on one system, you can't at present send a message to someone who's on another. Even BT's Prestel and Telecom Gold haven't been able to interconnect until very recently. Last year, One-to-One did offer to provide the links with the other systems, but for one reason or another, they just weren't interested.
Well, despite all the gibberish that I seem to be typing then, both those messages actually did get through to Fred OK, which was a bit of a surprise. I've now been joined by Roger Dean from One-to-One and Clem Jones from British Telecoms. Now, why can't you two get your act together?
Well, a year ago, you asked me why the various services couldn't talk to each other. Well, now they can. Through my efforts and the cooperation of the other electronic mail suppliers, customers on Comet, EasyLink, Telecom Gold and One-to-One can in fact now talk to each other. It brings together the critical mass that we need, and now you can talk to hundreds of thousands instead of just thousands.
Clem, this must have been very recent because that wasn't the case when we made that film, and that's only about 4 weeks ago.
Yes, I think two things have happened. One, as Roger says, we've recently put together an experiment to enable those to talk together, and that's proved very useful. And we are now into tests on the full system interworking called X400, which is joining all the private and public systems together.
Well, thank you. I'll be coming back to you in a moment. Fred?
Well, electronic mail is particularly useful when you're travelling, especially so, you might think, if you're travelling abroad.
Morning. I want to book into the Amsterdam flight, please.
Smoking or none for you?
I don't mind as long as it's an aisle seat.
Ladies and gentlemen, are the toilets and washrooms at the rear of the aircraft. I would ask you to remain seated until the seatbelt sign has been switched off. During the flight to Amsterdam, to settle for your drinks from our bar, followed by a light snack with a choice of tea or coffee. Thank you.
Now, with a portable computer, you can take your office with you literally wherever you go. And, of course, you can get on with anything that you want to do, typing letters or scripts. And the great thing about being up here is that I don't think I'm going to be interrupted by the telephone. When a journalist, salesman or businessman gets back on terra firma, they may well want to contact their office and send what they've written or see if there's any messages. The longer the messages, the more useful electronic mail becomes. Ah, just what I needed, a phone. And hopefully I'll be able to fix this, the acoustic coupler to the handset. Nope, it doesn't fit. Obviously what I need is a standard payphone. Here's a payphone. Let's hope the receiver is the right shape. Yes, it is. Well, I could, of course, call London Direct and use email in the usual way, but this would be rather expensive and it could be unreliable because the international lines are sometimes poor and that would corrupt the data. Now, there is another problem, it's a purely practical one. Unless I could use a phone card to make this call, I'd be stuck with shoveling coins in all the way through it. I wouldn't be able to hear the pips, and all in all, it would be a very frustrating business. In many developed countries, it is possible to make arrangements to use a local data service to get connected to the international packet switching system and get your message through that way. Well, that's what I've done here in Holland. So the next thing I've got to do is get some power on the computer, select telecom mode, and make one local call. And the cost of that call, 1 guilder, about 30 pence. 850161. I've got a line. So connect the phone up to the coupler. And it's working. Now, sometimes noise on the line produces odd characters on the screen. Yeah, we've got some there. That wants my Dutch ID, WWD 020. Password. Can't forget that, can you? Right. And now I'm into the Dutch Memocom system, which is similar to Telecom Gold. Now, here's the magic bit. If I type SYS81, it should connect me automatically via the international system to Telecom Gold in London, where I've got my mailbox. And I'm in. That's great. Right, onwards. ID BBC 007. Password. I'm not going to tell you what that is. Fine. Right, well, now I'm into gold, I can upload all this writing I've been doing on the plane and send it back to the office. So I want... Now send... BBC 001. And now the subject. Yeah. Text. Now I want to upload it. And off it goes. Lovely. And as soon as the text has finished going up through the screen, I'll know that that's departed. And those numbers confirm it's arrived in London. Very nice. Off I go. Off. That gets me off Telecom Gold. That gets me out of the Memocom system. It really is very convenient, and as you saw, it's very simple to use once you've got the hang of it, and it only takes a few minutes to send or receive a couple of pages of text. But although it only costs 30 pence to make that local call, it does cost £30 to register with the Dutch system, and there's a monthly charge. Well, the trouble is, as yet, there's no international agreement that allows a visitor like myself to arrive in a foreign country, to get through to home using the local system, and then be billed for it later. And in other countries, it's much more difficult than it has been here in Holland. Not much by way of encouragement, really, for anyone who travels to a lot of different countries. I shouldn't think they'd even bother to look into it. So, until the international telephone services get their act together, it looks as though this facility is going to remain largely undiscovered.
Well, as anyone who uses email regularly will know, what you do if you get a noisy line is simply redial, and then you hopefully get a good one. Right, gentlemen, what I'd really like to know from you is, when will I be able to take a portable micro to any country and still be able to pay for the bill back here in the UK?
Well, the various telephone authorities are working on international agreement, but it so happens that technology's beaten them to it. This little product was launched last week. It fits between the audio coupler that Lesley was using and the terminal, and has in it what's called a smart card, which is a small card with a computer chip in the corner there where the gold spot is, and within that chip there is both information about how to get through the various international services and a financial credit to enable you to use the service. And you buy this back at home and you can use it anywhere and you pay nothing else.
We've had another letter from Mr. Gaunt, and he says, why do I have to pay to receive messages? It's rather strange, that.
Well, with one-to-one, we do give you the first 30 seconds free, and you can then see if there is any mail waiting. But if you're very quick, you can also read the messages. However, in the States, this is an issue, and I believe that eventually people will just be charged as sending letters. Sending email will be the same.
Lesley, have we got any messages?
Yeah, well, I've been keeping an eye on the messages coming through during the day, and there's a point here for Clem, I think. It comes from a group of solicitors, and they ask, is there any possibility of seeing a paper directory for the users on Telecom Gold?
Yes, well, there is an electronic directory which covers the majority of the Telecom Gold users, some thousands of people, and we are working on producing a paper one.
It's because presumably the electronic one's pretty expensive, really.
Well, you have to be online to use it, yes,
Yeah.
so the paper one does have some advantages.
So it is
we are
coming.
working on it, yes.
Great.
Tell me why the documentation's so poor. We had a letter here from Andy Bromsgrove asking that.
Well, I believe that one-to-one is probably the simplest service. We only have 5 commands, and one of those is log off. But we can condense our instructions onto just a credit card.
Well, if you believe that, Mr. Bromsgrove, well done. There's more information about electronic mail in our notes, including some helpful hints on how to keep your bills down.
Well, next week is our last show before Christmas. We'll be looking at some ways of making music on your home micro and how one Californian wine grower is using computers to improve the quality of his wines. But until then, goodbye.